Okay. Hi, my name is Michael Chan, and I'm honored to be here with Mayor de Blasio and his team for this important event. I've been a hybrid car owner for the last 10 years. I have owned two models of the Toyota Prius, a Toyota Highlander hybrid and a Honda Civic hybrid. Although these are considered fuel-efficient vehicles, they are still gasoline-fed machines that pollute the air we breathe. This past April, I took the plunge into the world of fully electric vehicle ownership. The BMW i3 and the Tesla Model S are both fully electric vehicles capable of 0 to 60 between 6 to 7 seconds with zero emissions. When plugged into 240-volt AC, these cars can get a full charge anywhere between 3 to 6 hours. Both the Tesla and the BMW i3 are equipped to charge up to 80% in 30 to 45 minutes at special fast charging stations. I currently know of 3 locations in New York City. For the BMW, there's one in Fresh Meadows, Queens, and one by Prospect Park, Brooklyn. For the Tesla, there's only one at JFK Airport. Although I am no longer reliant on gasoline, I find myself juggling 30 minutes of my life charging at one of these 3 fast charging stations. And my time to charge usually happens in the middle of the night after I put the baby to sleep and my chores are done. Although free, it is a major pain to charge at these free full fast charging stations. Currently in New York City, access to free 240-volt level 2 charging is limited to paid parking lots, hotel guests, and airport parking and supermarkets such as this Whole Foods here. Unless you have implemented a home-based charging station, most of New York doesn't have access to charging stations readily available. This is a major contributing factor why electric vehicles are not feasible in New York City currently. Mayor de Blasio has been a strong advocate for clean transportation in this city and expanding access to electrical vehicles for our residents. I'm really excited by what I'm hearing from the mayor's team about electric vehicles. And I'm even more excited to introduce you to our mayor, who has some great news for New Yorkers.
Thank you very much. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Well, Michael, thank you very much. I really appreciate that you are helping your fellow New Yorkers to know what an extraordinary thing it is to have an electric vehicle. Michael is the first person in the world to ever teach me to plug in an electric vehicle to its fuel source, and that is about as easy as it gets. That's significantly easier than pumping gas at the pump. But Michael, you're obviously believe fully in the value of electric vehicles and what they can do for our environment. And I'm glad this is going to make it easier for you and your family to find a charging station, to have that time back that you're putting in now, getting to the right place. We want to make it easy. And I appreciate Michael and so many other New Yorkers who are turning to electric vehicles. We want to make this easier and a better experience for all of them, and make electric vehicles a lot more common in this city. So I want to tell you today about this announcement, but I got to up front talk about the situation that's occurring down in the Caribbean, because this is on the minds of so many people, and we all have to get ready to respond to it. Just talked to one of my colleagues whose father is in Puerto Rico, and she expressed her fear for her own family and the sheer sense of the unknown. This is, we believe, the biggest storm to ever hit Puerto Rico, a place that we feel so close to as New Yorkers. 700,000 New Yorkers of Puerto Rican descent right here. And we feel that Puerto Rico is really a part of us. And right now, what I'm hearing is almost the entire island is without electricity. The effects of the storm are just beginning to be understood, and the flooding is vast. So we know this is a crisis that's going to afflict Puerto Rico for today, but also for weeks and weeks, probably months and months to come. And we have to be there for Puerto Rico. And we also know other parts of the Caribbean have been hit so hard. I want to particularly note the U.S. Virgin Islands, which has just gone through hell. Irma first, and now the effects of Maria. These are fellow Americans as well, and they're going to need a lot of help too. So a lot of people who are suffering right now because of unprecedented storms. And look, it's pertinent to what we're talking about today. These storms are occurring because of global warming. We have never seen this kind of frequency and intensity. We have eyes to see. We know global warming is contributing greatly to this crisis. And it's a reminder of everything we have to do to address climate change everywhere to try to stop this horrible cycle of destruction. For so many New Yorkers right now, they are waiting in agony for information about their loved ones in Puerto Rico. And 3.5 million people, almost all of whom have a connection to New York City. And it must be very, very painful for every single one of them not knowing what's going on with their loved ones. We want the 3.5 million people of Puerto Rico to know that 8.5 million New Yorkers will stand by them. We will be with them in the days and weeks ahead. We already have a team in Puerto Rico of our first responders who were there in response to Irma and stayed. We have another team ready to go that will literally fly as soon as FEMA gives the orders that it's safe to land in Puerto Rico and begin their work. We're working very closely with FEMA and officials on the ground in Puerto Rico to make sure that our assets will be deployed quickly. We'll send personnel, we'll send supplies, and I know New Yorkers are looking for every conceivable way to help, and we'll be providing that information in the coming hours and days about all the ways that New Yorkers can help people in Puerto Rico and in other parts of the Caribbean that were so hard hit. It would be bad enough just seeing what's going on in the Caribbean. Obviously, our hearts go out to the people of Mexico who are going through this horrible earthquake. They're digging out from a shocking disaster as well right now, and for all of us, there are neighbors in this hemisphere, but also for almost 250,000 New Yorkers. Mexico is their homeland, and again, so many New Yorkers of Mexican descent feeling a great deal of fear and confusion right now about what's happening to their loved ones too. So we're going to provide all the help we can as a city, with a particular focus on Puerto Rico. Everyone knows what Puerto Rico's been through in the last few years. We know that their infrastructure is in very poor shape and their government financial situation is deeply troubled. We particularly have to focus on helping Puerto Rico there. They need our help in a particular way. Again, we'll have more to say on that in the coming days and on the ways that New Yorkers can help, and all the people of Puerto Rico and the Caribbean and Mexico will be in our thoughts and prayers. Just a few words in Spanish on this point. La ciudad de Nueva York está con los puertorriqueños hoy y en los días y meses difíciles que vienen. Tenemos personal de la policía y bomberos en Puerto Rico y estamos listos para enviar más equipos y ayuda cuando sea seguro hacerlo. Les pido que ayuden y tengan en sus pensamientos a sus vecinos neoyorquinos y sus familias en Puerto Rico. With that, I bring us back to what we're here to talk about, and I wish the two were not directly linked, but they are. The hurricanes that have hit the Caribbean, what happened in Florida, what happened in Texas, what happened years previous in this city with Sandy, it's all clearly linked together. It's all a result of climate change. We are vulnerable, and we're vulnerable because of mistakes that humanity has made that have to be corrected. This is nothing less than an existential threat, and every person, every city, every state, every nation have to be a part of the solution. So the city declared our adherence to the 80% emission reduction goal by 2050. That was before President Trump decided to take the United States out of the Paris Agreement. After that, our sense of urgency increased. We committed to a new goal to reduce emissions, our proportionate share of emissions, to achieve the higher standard of a global warming level of no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. We will be announcing a series of steps. A few days back, we announced the new plan mandating, for the first time ever, that buildings address emissions in a very bold way. This is the next step in the plan, what we're doing to expand the availability of electric vehicle charging stations because electric vehicles are an important part of the solution. There will be other parts of the plan coming forward as well based on the original 90 days we gave all departments to recalibrate to that higher goal in the Paris Agreement. We said very clearly that buildings are the #1 challenge in New York City, but vehicles are also a very important issue to address. And electric vehicles are game changers. It's striking how much better they are. They mean fewer carbon emissions. The fact that you have right here a vehicle right before our very eyes, looks like any other vehicle, gets charged and then emits nothing is an amazing, amazing statement. Once upon a time, electric vehicles were considered somewhat exotic and out of the reach of everyday people. Now there are models under $30,000 and the price continues to go down. The easier we make it for electric vehicles, the more manufacturers will build and the more the price will go down. And when you have an electric vehicle, it means big savings for the driver, big savings for the family, average $400 saved for every 10,000 miles driven in an electric vehicle versus a gas vehicle. For New Yorkers who need to have a car, choose to have a car, this is an important day because it makes the point. If you need a car, then it's time to recognize the future is electric. This is an indicator of the shape of things to come. So as you're thinking ahead, look to purchase an electric car. It's a smart move for your family, for your bottom line, and it's a great, great move for the environment. And we're going to change the game ourselves by increasing the number of charging stations rapidly. We're committing to installing 50 fast charging hubs in this city by 2020. So 50 hubs that will be fully accessible to the public with the latest technology that allows a fast charge and is convenient for drivers. We will start with a major hub in each borough by the end of next year. The hubs we'll put in for each borough will have 20 charging stations each, so 20 of these exact stations you see over here per hub. So we'll be putting in 100 hubs overall by the end of next year. And overall for the city, 50 fast charging hubs. We believe this is how we help lead the way in this city, by making this technology more and more available to everyday New Yorkers. Now, in a fast charging hub with one of these stations, it takes about 30 minutes to charge a car. The previous models took up to 8 hours. So there are a number of charging stations around the city that provide that 8-hour recharge, but it's not shocking to know for a lot of drivers it doesn't work so well for them. At this point in New York City, there's only about 16 stations, 16 units like that there, that provide fast charging and are open to the public in any way, shape, or form. By the end of next year, there will be 100 more that we will put in. And then when we put in the 50 hubs, there'll be different sizes depending on the area need. And I want to emphasize, I'm going to come over to this map for a moment, pointing to some of these locations, all 5 rows. These are not the final locations, but these are the most likely places for the build-out of the 50 stations. Some of those, 50 hubs, some of those hubs will have as few as 4 stations, depending on the amount of need, up to as many as 20 stations per hub. So when we get to 2020, we will take today's 16 available all over the city and turn it into hundreds and hundreds more. This is going to change the calculus for drivers and make this a much better option. So here's what we hope will result. 2 years ago in this city, less than 1% of cars were electric. Less than 1%. Based on this announcement and other measures we'll take, our goal is to have at least 20% of all new vehicles in New York City be electric by 2025. Huge difference this will make in terms of our environment. Now, I want to emphasize up front, the goal is to reduce emissions, the goal is to save the earth and to make electric vehicles more viable for more New Yorkers. Here's what's not the goal. We do not aim to have more cars on our streets. We want that those people who must have a car and make that choice more and more turn to electric. But for everyday New Yorkers, we want to keep making it easier and easier to turn to mass transit as the first choice. So when you look at the locations, in many cases, they're in areas that are particularly car dependent. Because we know, as much as we keep trying to expand mass transit, it's not getting to every part of the city as much as we want. There's some parts of the city where you really need a car more than others. We want in those areas particularly to make it much easier to go with an electric car. The goal is to keep building out mass transit at the same time. So we are continuing to build the NYC ferry system. The select bus service routes will continue to grow. City Bike will continue to expand. Light rail will start for the first time. And all of that has immense expansion capacity as we make this more and more a city of mass transit. But where there are cars, we want them to be electric cars to the maximum extent possible. I also will say that we hope we can do more and more to make mass transit work better. All those things the city is sponsoring, and as you all know, I very much believe a millionaire's tax would be a game changer in terms of sustaining the MTA's mass transit options as well. So, look, we have a chance in this city, once again, to make an outsized impact. It's not just we're 8.5 million people. And when we do something better, the earth feels it and it helps the earth. It's also that when we set a new trend, a lot of other places in the world pay attention. And it helps move the standard everywhere. And that's what we seek to do to really make a change as we fight global warming on all fronts. Just a few words summarizing in Spanish. Estamos anunciando un paso importante en nuestra lucha contra el cambio climático. Para el año 2020 vamos a tener 50 estaciones de recarga para autos eléctricos. Y vamos a empezar el próximo año con una en cada condado. Con este paso, promovemos el uso de autos eléctricos y ayudamos a reducir las emisiones de gases invernadero. With that, I want to turn to a couple of real experts on what this means and the impact it'll have, and one who's been a partner in so many of our efforts to address climate change in this city, and she's been a great leader for years, the president of the New York League of Conservation Voters, Marcia Bistrin. I'm giving you height, too.
He's given me height.
The gift of height.
Right, exactly. So before I give my brief remarks about this particular initiative, I do want to applaud this administration and the mayor, of course, in particular, because it's his administration, for their aggressive agenda around climate. Their 80-50 plan is sophisticated and I think perhaps most importantly has woven in issues that perhaps weren't there before, issues of inequality and the broader set of issues confronting New Yorkers. So this is just a piece of a broader agenda that this administration has. As the mayor has said, electric cars produce 50% less greenhouse emissions, and that number will get even higher as more and more renewable energy comes online to power them. And this will help the city to achieve its 80 by 50 goals, as 30% of our emissions come from the transportation sector. So this is a very important sector when it comes to CO2 emissions. Plugging cars into the grid also means we're supporting energy producers here in New York. In addition, I think we all know electric vehicles have huge benefits for air quality. More than 40% of smog is caused by gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles. And as you also know, asthma rates in the city are far higher than they should be, and that the particulate matter that comes from traditional powering of vehicles contributes to asthma. In 2013, to frame this more broadly, New York State joined, we can talk about the state briefly, can't we? New York joined California, Connecticut, Maryland, Massachusetts, Oregon, Rhode Island, and Vermont in what's called the Zero Emissions Vehicle Memorandum of Understanding, recognizing the importance of working collectively. But I think that it is very important for New Yorkers that we have our own aggressive goal of achieving 20% of the city's vehicle emissions, vehicle registrations to electric by 2025. New York is also doing its part by adding 2,000 electric vehicles to the city's fleet by 2025. And I think that I can't say with more enthusiasm how thrilled we are to see Mayor de Blasio and Con Ed partnering to install these fast chargers in 5 locations within 20 charging stations. Is that right? 5 locations? 5 boroughs.
With 20
charging.
Each borough and 20 stations each.
You heard it right
5
from the
hubs,
mayor's
20
lips.
station each.
And he's memorized. He knows it. He didn't just read this, right?
Memorized. Very challenging.
That was just to spotlight him. We hope that this effort, and we're sure that this effort, will also spur additional private investment to help build out a truly robust set of charging stations. So once again, kudos to this administration. Now you can applaud.
All right.
Thank
Well
you.
done. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marcia. And another great leader in the effort to promote electric vehicles. In fact, she's been the lead organizer for the New York State Electric Vehicles Initiative for this Sierra Club. My pleasure to introduce Kat Fisher.
It's great to see everyone here today. Of course, Sierra Club applauds the Mayor's Office for this groundbreaking commitment to electric vehicle charging infrastructure. This announcement comes at a perfect time as we see the rollout of longer range vehicles, prices have fallen, and investment in global corporate partnerships are really coming to the forefront now to electrify their fleets, offer more workplace charging, and also as communities ramp up with resiliency planning in preparation for more extreme weather events like we're seeing. Mayor de Blasio stands out as a leader among U.S. mayors by electrifying New York City's large urban fleet. And while Sierra Club continues to call for electrification of mass transit as well, in particular transit buses, we also support expanding the individual charging network, which is a crucial next step. It's also one of the things that almost every stakeholder in this industry and all the drivers agree this is the thing that has to happen next. And among the legislators, this is the one thing that everyone agrees on. Strategically located charging hubs will bring New York City into alignment with other major metropolitan cities. We hear more and more commitments from cities around the world every day, and will help us to achieve our shared clean air and climate change goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to take a moment to give some credit where credit is due. One, I want to, Marcia reminded me to acknowledge and thank Con Edison because they have agreed to partner with us. When you see those sites on the map on either side, some of those are city-owned sites, some of those are Con Edison sites, but this is an initiative we will undertake together to maximize the number of sites where these electric charging stations will be. So my thanks to Con Edison, my thanks to all of the environmental advocacy groups who are with us, many of whom have been pushing for a long time for us to go farther, and we're going to continue to, but their advocacy has made a big, big difference. And of course, the members of my administration who have been so crucial to creating this plan and will be responsible for implementing it. Our Chief Resilience Officer, Dan Zerilli, Director for the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, Mark Chambers, our DCAS Commissioner, Lizette Camillo, and Commissioner of the Taxi and Limousine Commission, Mira Joshi. Thanks to all of them for the great work they are doing. I want you to hear from some of my colleagues. First, I know a man who likes to see every good thing start in Brooklyn. And here's another example. We're announcing in Brooklyn something that's going to be big for Brooklyn and the whole city. Borough President Eric Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. And more than a tree grows in Brooklyn, charging stations will grow in Brooklyn. I think that one of the challenges that we're having as a person who drives a hybrid, use mass transit, and ride my bike to and from Borough Hall, one of the greatest challenges we're going to have is to fully understand the scope of, in order to move our country forward, we must make sure that government is doing what's right. We must make sure that manufacturers and corporation is doing what is right. But what is even more important, we must engage the public. By having access to charging station, it allows the public to be in charge of the vehicles and to lower their carbon footprint and let them actively participate in how we improve our environment. Kudos for the mayor. Kudos for all those who are involved. Kudos for Con Edison. We look forward to moving this initiative forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Borough President. Next, City Council has really been focused on this issue, and last year passed groundbreaking legislation to start us on the road to having more and more electric vehicle charging stations. And we are building on that success today and using the full weight of the city to go farther and take the next big step. The author of the legislation from last year and the leader in the council as chair of the Environmental Protection Committee is here with us, and I thank him for his great leadership. Councilmember Costa Constantinides.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Every day, millions take cars on the streets of New York, and those cars emit dangerous gases from their tailpipes. This exhaust is one of the leading causes of carbon and greenhouse gases responsible for climate change. This exhaust accounts for an estimated 75% of carbon monoxide pollution, a third of smog, and 27% of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. It also accounts for a large percentage of nitrous oxides, which contributes to ozone pollution, the one major federal clean air standard that we are still striving to meet. Getting consumers to embrace electric vehicles is definitely a cornerstone of what we're accomplishing, and we started on that path with 1124, and we can build it out, build it bigger and better today. And making it easier for residents, millions of New Yorkers, to say, I want to have an electric car and have a place to charge it. Making things as easy to be green as they are traditional goes a long way, because then residents can make decisions based on their green values and not just on convenience or their pocketbook. So I want to applaud my partner on 1124, Ydanis Rodriguez, who's chair of our Transportation Committee, and Brad Lander as well, a great leader on the environment, for getting us across the finish line last year. And to make truly EVs available to every New Yorker, we need to have an entire network. So I look forward to, I'm excited about today's announcement. Kudos to the mayor and his team. We look forward to doing even more legislation in the future on this topic to continue our growth, continue our partnership, and reach those goals and go past those goals. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Next, not only a great advocate for mass transit, but for also making sure that transportation is affordable to working people. And that's another great part of the story around electric vehicles, that they are going to become more and more affordable, and the fuel is definitely more affordable, and the more stations are out there, the more people can take advantage of that. The chair of the Transportation Committee, Councilmember Ydanis Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and everyone in the private sector. Your partnership is very important. We hope to see more members of the private sector not only doing what you're doing today, but also making most of the vehicle electrical one. A few weeks ago, I visited one of the beverage distribution, and I was happy to see that they are also moving forward, making so those vehicles also electrical. With today's announcement, we will see a significant expansion of fast charging stations in all 5 boroughs under the leadership of Mayor de Blasio, and we'll underscore our clean air effort, such as Car-Free Day, creating and expanding bike lanes in all 5 boroughs, increasing access to bike and car share program, and improving mass transit. Today is a historical day because the city is announcing that we are getting into electrical vehicle at a moment where the Caribbean's being hurt by this natural disaster, and also Mexico. Only someone that doesn't understand that climate change is real will never get it, that we have to do the best we can to reduce pollution here in New York City. So this is not only for us, this is about for the future generation. And as the mayor explaining, with the lay rail, with the ferry through the 5 boroughs, we also the bicycle and other incentive. What we want to send the message is we want to go through public transportation as the first priority. Only 1.1 million New Yorkers own vehicle to the total 1.8 cars. It is possible to reduce that number to 1 million by 2030. So we are not here in incentivizing New Yorkers to get into a vehicle. What we are saying today is if we go through electrical vehicle, we can do a small contribution to reduce contamination, to be sure that we do the best we can to keep our planet for the future generation. Hoy estamos aquí porque es un día donde el alcalde con su liderazgo está mandando un mensaje de que la ciudad de Nueva York está liderando un movimiento a nivel nacional que está diciendo podemos ir o a usar los vehículos eléctricos porque de esa forma podemos reducir la contaminación y podemos también prevenir desastres naturales como los que están afectando al Caribe y al México en este momento. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you very much. Finally, it's nice to be back in my homeland, and the council member who succeeded me is doing a great job. He has been a strong, strong voice for the environment, and this community is one that really believes in doing everything conceivable to help the environment, so I know the availability of more charging stations is going to be something his constituents will take full advantage of. Councilmember Brad Lander.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and congratulations to you and to all your team on this, to Chairs Constantinides and Rodriguez for leading the way in the council, and to the advocates for pushing us as always. It is really fitting to be doing this in Gowanus, and not only because it's in the 39th district. Let's remember 5 years ago when Sandy hit, the Gowanus was one of the places that flooded its banks. So while our hearts are in Puerto Rico and have been recently in Florida and Texas, look, it's only a matter of time before our city also is hit again. And the decisions we make about reducing emissions will have a big impact in determining what our own future is, not just the future of other people around the world. And that's why we've got really significant work to do together on buildings, and I'm glad we're going to be moving forward to do that. And it is why we've got really significant work to do together on vehicles. Gowanus is a place, and the neighborhoods around here are a place where people care about this and are starting to purchase electric cars and are starting to say to me, Councilman, where am I going to charge that electric car? So it is great that the city is going to make it more and more possible for people to do that. We're also taking other steps, and I think it's important to see them. This is a neighborhood where City Bike only fairly recently expanded last year, and you can already see, I know there are trips I don't take in my car because of bike share, and there are other neighbors I have that do that. This is one of the neighborhoods that's going to be in the pilot of the city's new car share program, which will make it possible for people to be sharing cars and expanding out our car share program, and therefore owning fewer vehicles, as Chair Rodriguez said. It's the first neighborhood we're going to be planning toward a rezoning in that's in a flood zone and a Superfund zone, and as a result of which we're going to have more work to do to think about what this neighborhood looks like if we have that shared vision of really reducing emissions and living on a healthier planet. And I just want to end by underlining it is also a neighborhood that believes deeply in good mass transit and sees the urgent need to be strengthening it. That is why I support the Millionaire's Tax effort, why I'll support almost any effort that will really reduce congestion and invest in mass transit. And one thing I'm looking forward to in that vein is the citywide transit study, another shared council initiative the administration is doing some great work on, and that really together is helping us build out the ambitious and more sustainable future that we want to have.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Brad. Okay, we're going to take questions on this announcement, and then we'll take questions on other topics. Yes, sir.
Unless that's a really cool sculpture and nothing else, it would appear that wind generation is part of the power source for this charging station. Will there be a renewable component at the other charging stations around the city?
Excellent question. I want Dan or Mark. Who's got it? don't know if it's just a cool sculpture or not. What is it?
It is cool. It is not a sculpture. It is a vertical wind turbine. It is part of this system in terms of providing power for these charging stations, along with the 324 kW kilowatt solar panels above the roof canopy here of the parking.
And is that typical of the designs to come?
So this is not a typical design, but it is something that makes it much more efficient.
See a renewable component at these charging stations?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Yes, Grace.
Are there plans to add more electric cars to the city's vehicle fleet?
Yep.
Could you detail them, and just for your own, SUVs that you travel in? Any plans to go electric?
So my SUV now is a hybrid. I would love to get it to electric. That's something we'll have to decide with the NYPD. And I think it's a bigger question around police vehicles and emergency vehicles. What specific functions work for our electric vehicles? What might require gas-powered vehicles or hybrids? That's a decision we'll certainly make with NYPD. My goal, I've stated it already, as part of the One NYC plan, is that we will be moving to an all-electric car fleet for the city, with the exception, again, of situations where emergency vehicles or first responder vehicles that may need to be other options. But for everyday cars being used by city employees, those will move to all-electric over the coming years. Other questions on this? Yes.
Just knowing how fights have broken out over outlets, people looking to charge their phone, can anyone speak to sort of what happens since there's such a scarcity of these charging locations around the city? Does everyone behave? Do people unplug each other's cars?
Charging stations. Well, you're an expert. Why don't you speak to it? You've actually experienced it. Are there fist fights at the electric charging stations?
Unplug your car?
Yes, it does happen where some people park at a charging station and leave their car overnight, and that's definitely something that's frowned upon by electric car owners.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about slashing tires and breaking windows, but yeah, definitely there's some good practices that must be adopted by all car owners, whether you're an electric owner or a non-electric owner. So yeah.
Please. Well done.
I'd also just like to make the point that it's often charging on the street is needed, absolutely. But for the majority of driving that people do, and the cars that are out now with the range that they have, we can't overestimate the need for charging. Many people who can charge at home or have high-range vehicles don't need the same amount of charging. So we do need more charging, absolutely. But for me and the car that I drive, all my daily driving can usually be taken care of on a single charge that I get at home. And it does depend on one of the things we have to solve is charging for multi-unit dwellings, which I hope the state is working on, and we're looking to California and other places for how to do that. But on-street charging is needed, absolutely, but we also, many cars have the range now that they don't need to charge in between, especially if you're a city driver. Thanks.
I think the central point is a good real-life question about New York City. I think the central point is that, an 8-hour charge, unfortunately, tempts some people to do exactly what Michael said. A half-hour charge is something that people can do, stay by their vehicle in a much more reasonable way. You're talking now, again, from going to 16 stations that are available around the city but are not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is hubs that are well publicized, open to all, 24/7. Again, the first set of them, 20 stations, 20 of those individual stations at each hub, only 30 minutes per car. So I think that's going to really allow for a much smoother situation for people seeking a charge. And then as we build out to the 50 hubs all over the city, I think it'll address the issue even more. Willie.
Climate change question?
What? Sure.
You said just now that this is nothing less than an existential threat, and every person, every state, and every city has to be a part of the solution.
Yep.
Last week I asked you about the houses that you own in
Yes.
and what you had done there to make them more energy efficient. You said you would provide answers later. I've asked repeatedly for answers and haven't gotten that.
I will make sure you do. I did not personally follow up on that, and I don't remember we've had contractors do different work. And I can get you, again, forgive me because I don't have it at my fingertips, but I know we've had different equipment installed that was an improvement in terms of energy conservation. So we will double down and get you that answer. I will find out. I'll work with Eric, but certainly in the next few days. Go ahead.
What's the anticipated cost for installing these 50 new pumps?
So the initial, and I'll start, and Mark will join me. You'll help me talk it through. So on the initial set of 5 hubs, 20 charging stations per hub, which is the biggest we anticipate doing, we anticipate that to be a $10 million expense. The future ones are going to cost less because they're not going to have, we think in the vast majority of cases, they're not going to have that many stations per hub. Again, we will start with 4 stations per hub, and some may be bigger. And we're going to be working with Con Ed, and in certain cases, Con Ed will defray the cost. So the initial cost, $10 million. We'll get you a build-out cost as we go along, but we think it's going to be more modest per hub as we go along. Other questions? Willie?
Again, the Department of Buildings records show that in one of your buildings you installed a new boiler and a new water heater in 2010. Neither of those appear to have been Energy Star certified.
Yeah, I have to find out. I'm just not intimate with it. Charlene did a lot of that work with contractors. I got to find out for you. Questions on this announcement before we go to other topics? On this announcement, going once, going twice. Other topics. Mara.
Mr. Mayor, your Republican opponent, Nicole Malliotakis, just held a press conference earlier today in which she criticized your approach to the homelessness crisis, and she said that she would divert the money being spent to build 90 new shelters toward permanent housing instead. She also seemed to say that she could get homeless individuals out of hotels sooner than 2023. Do you want to comment on that?
I have not seen what the Assembly member put out. I can speak to my plan. We've had a major emphasis on stopping people from becoming homeless to begin with rental subsidies and with anti-eviction legal services. That is now going to be greatly strengthened by the excellent new law passed by the Council, the Right to Counsel law. We think that proactive approach to keep people from ever ending up in shelter is the number one thing that matters. But we've also had a lot of success getting people from shelter to better housing. 64,000 people over now almost 4 years have been moved out of shelter and to better affordable housing. That doesn't mean I'm satisfied. I'm not. I'm very, very clear. This is a tough battle, a long battle. We have to keep doing better. I have to keep doing better. There's no two ways about it. But we have certainly shown that we know how to stop people from ever ending up homeless in large numbers, and that we've been able to move people from shelter to better housing in large numbers. I would disagree with any plan that suggests we shouldn't focus on getting out of hotels and clusters via creating new shelter capacity, because I think it wouldn't be realistic to say that we're going to get out of all the clusters and we're going to get out of all the hotels without having additional shelter capacity. The affordable housing we're building, of course, is going to a wide range of New Yorkers, but as I said, for 64,000 people, we've been able to get them help and get them better housing. But in the meantime, there's a really substantial number of people who need shelter. If you get out of hotels and you get out of clusters and you don't have an alternative, you're going to end up with a lot more people on the street, and no one wants that. So I would just disagree with that assumption. Please.
The Assemblywoman, was asked about a poll, and maybe you want to comment on this poll that came out yesterday showing you 47 percentage points ahead in the polls against Ms. Malliotakis. Do you have any? I guess Ms. Malliotakis actually said that her internal poll suggested that the race was much closer. Do you think the polls are right on?
I have a real news flash for you here. Get ready. I have not seen Assemblymember Malliotakis' internal polling. So I really don't know what she's seeing. I feel very confident in everything we're seeing. And look, I don't hang on each poll. You've been here at many a press conference when I had a good day in the polls and a bad day in the polls. I don't get lost in it. I feel very good about the primary result and the support I've received from my fellow Democrats. I feel good about what our campaign is doing and saying. It's a very vigorous campaign. We're reaching every part of the city. But there's more work to do. So for the next 7 weeks, we're going to run a very, very intensive campaign. I feel good about the course we're on, but, you know, I never respond to any individual poll. Please, please.
I know you've been asked about shelters in Park Slope when you were not in Park Slope, and since you've been asked about homelessness when you're in Park Slope, I just want to say one word about it. There are 2 hotels just a few blocks down on 3rd Avenue that now house homeless individuals. We support, and the community board actually had a meeting the Department of Homeless Services came to in June, having one of those 90 shelters cited here as part of the effort not to have the hotels, which are not the right place for those individuals, be housed. And yes, of course, we want more permanent and affordable housing. That's why we're looking at the rezoning. But that's something we got to have here. And if we don't build out that new shelter capacity, we're not going to wind up with those individuals out of the shelters and cluster sites. And DHS came out and had a good meeting with Community Board 6 to talk about citing it. And
right, and I thank you, Brad, because it's a very important point. This is my home district, and this is a district that will be adding shelter capacity as part of our plan to balance shelter capacity consistent with the number of people in shelter from each borough and each community board.
Mayor, as you know, from time to time, on a regular basis, large groups of bike riders take to the streets. They call them ride-outs. There was one this weekend. 16 young people were arrested for disorderly conduct, and at one point, a large group of them broke off and shut down the Cross Bronx. They actually went onto the expressway. What's your level of concern about these ride-outs, and should the police have done more to keep them off the highway?
Well, they're not acceptable. Let me make that very clear. So to anyone thinking of participating in such a thing, they're not acceptable. NYPD will respond vigorously, and there will be real consequences, and a number of those people were arrested. They are obviously not a very common thing in this city, thank God, but I think they're not a common thing in large measure because we've made very clear we won't tolerate it. So NYPD quickly addressed that situation and has been very vigorous, not only in terms of bike riders, but also folks with motorcycles and off-road vehicles who have acted illegally. I remember very vividly Commissioner Bratton sent a powerful message to that constituency by crushing a number of their confiscated vehicles. So, no, we don't take it lightly, and it has not been a widespread trend because the NYPD has been so vigorous about it. Yeah, go ahead.
One other question, if I may. The New York Times is reporting this afternoon that there was a rush to open the 2nd Avenue subway in order to meet Governor Cuomo's deadline. The safety inspections have not been completed. 9 months later, it's still operating under a temporary fire suppression permit. Crews have to be placed along the track to make sure there are no fires because the equipment that would detect them is not fully certified. What's your level of concern about this?
Look, I don't know all the details. I defer to our fire department to address this, and if there is any particular concern, I want to make sure everyone is safe, obviously, and that's a joint obligation we would have in case of anything that might cause a fire. That's something we would take very seriously, and obviously I'm sure the MTA takes very seriously. So I'll have to have my folks follow up, but the ultimate word on that should be the FDNY. Jillian.
Yeah, Mayor, can you tell me what the minimum wage in New York is without looking at any notes?
$11 unless you are a company of 10 or fewer employees, in which case it is the very, very different number of $10.50.
Bring notes on that?
I study it all day long. I've memorized the minimum wage chart all the time.
Veronica Vanderpool was one of your appointees to the FDA, published an editorial yesterday. You may not have read it.
I've not.
You not always read things. It's effectively argued on a daily basis, poor people take the subway into Manhattan. Wealthier people take their cars. Ergo, congestion pricing is progressive. Your argument that it is regressive makes no sense. Cutting down on congestion in Manhattan would reduce emissions, and it's time for you to come out behind it. What do you say?
Disagree. Look, she's been a great member of the MTA board, and we believe in democracy around here, so she certainly has a right to her opinion, even when I disagree. But no, I know a regressive tax when I see one. There are a lot of working class people even low-income people who own vehicles, and there are reasons they have to go to Manhattan, and they are paying the exact same tax as someone who makes $1 million. Look, with income tax, we are very clear about gradating according to the level of wealth. To me, the fact that this, at least the proposal we've seen in the past, I remind everyone, we have not seen a proposal for congestion pricing. And I would just urge you guys, you might want to ask for that proposal because you ask about it all the time, except it doesn't exist. We literally have not seen a proposal from Albany for congestion pricing. But if you talk about what we've seen in the past, I think it's regressive, and I think it puts a particular burden on the people of Brooklyn and Queens. And I think I've said that a whole lot of times. I still feel that. Grace.
I believe the city sent 17 or some number of FDNY, NYPD officials down to Puerto Rico. I'm wondering if they arrived before the storm hit, if you've gotten any reports back. And for you, do you have any plans, or are you considering visiting yourself to sort of survey the damage or make a show of New York's support?
I do not have a plan at this moment. We obviously want to understand what's happened and what would be most helpful. There's a group that's down there that was from the previous group with Irma. Some came back, but some stayed. I believe it's give or take 10 that are still there. The group going down is somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 or 20 plus. We can get to the exact number, and they are literally ready and waiting for the instruction from FEMA to be able to move. And we're going to coordinate with FEMA and with the governor of Puerto Rico, the mayor of San Juan, and others to make sure that we provide everything we can. And we also want to facilitate all the help that people are ready to volunteer, and we want to do everything we can to help that. So we'll have more to say on that in the coming days.
So can you give us an update on the Flushing crash? What you make of the report that the guy who was driving the bus was killed and fired by the MTA? And finally, can you tell us what the city is doing at that specific intersection at Third and Main Street here to protect pedestrians who are crossing?
So initial information, I want to just emphasize, there obviously has not been a full investigation. The intersection is one that has not been one of our biggest problem areas. Obviously, Northern Boulevard in general has gotten a lot of attention under Vision Zero. That particular intersection hasn't been one of our bigger problems, but we're certainly going to look and see if there's anything we need to do there. You've all seen the video by now. It's not even close. It is tragic. I don't know, and we'll never know, I fear, whether the driver had fallen asleep, whether he was under the influence of something. But it just had nothing to do with any way normal people drive. And from the reports we've heard, over 60 miles an hour, clearly the bus was going as slowly and carefully in a turn as you could possibly imagine. Look, I fear what's going on here is an industry that is really unfair to its workers and exploitative and forces workers to work unusually long hours without additional benefits. I mean, it's one thing if people get, time and a half or get other incentives so they can actually make a decent living and therefore hopefully work limited hours. But in this industry, apparently you have no option in some of these private companies to make any additional income. So you just have to try and get every hour you can, even to the point, tragically, of people maybe taking too many risks. I don't think this company was responsible at all. I mean, we hear, and again, this is initial, but the guy was not even properly licensed. It's horrible. And I am not expert enough about the federal regulations and the state regulations related to the bus companies, but I think there's a need for some kind of crackdown here because this should never happen.
Do anything, and do you think the city should do anything?
I don't know the answer. We are certainly looking at whatever our options are. I mean, typically something like a private bus company that does interstate trips and all falls under, a combination of federal and state regulation. We'll look at it for sure. But it's, from what I can see, it's an exploitative industry that needs to be reined in. Yeah.
Yes or no question. Have you ever taken a nap in City Hall in your time as mayor? And if so, how many times would you estimate that's happened?
You, my friend, are, I've told you before, I understand the agenda of your newspaper, which makes you different from the others around you. You are playing out an agenda. I'm not participating. It's a ridiculous question. Gloria, I'm not going to answer you. It's a ridiculous question.
Mr. Mayor, it seems like there's finally a deal with the City Council on construction safety. I wanted to just get your comments on that in general, but also for you to respond to some of the criticism from the real estate industry that says that this bill is going to negatively impact immigrant workers and cut them out of a lot of these jobs.
I don't understand that. I mean, on your first question, Gloria, just as I was coming here, the report I got from my colleagues was we're very close to a final plan. I think some details are still being worked out, but definitely very, very close. And there's been a great effort with the council to get to a final plan. I mentioned last week that the real estate industry was overreacting on our mandate on building emissions, and I think was mischaracterizing the mandate. I think they're doing it again in this case because the notion of having a minimum standard of training for people working on a construction site, that's hardly radical. And the number that was, as I understand it, or this on the verge of being agreed upon, is not an onerous one, and it's about basic safety. And look, I've been very pained by these horrible accidents and the people we've lost and the families who have lost a loved one. It's not right. We have to do something different by definition. What's more getting at the root of the problem than to provide the training? So I think like many things, it will end up being a perfectly livable plan when it's finalized. Yes, Julie.
Mayor, just to follow up on Bill's question about congestion pricing, I'm just curious what you would, wouldn't that argument mean that every single toll in New York City is also a regressive tax? And if so, are you going to look to change the tolling structure?
The tolling structure was based on building bridges, building roads, maintaining them in a way that was upfront in the equation. But this one falls on people from Brooklyn and Queens in a particular way. I've never seen a plan that addresses that squarely. And unlike something where you say, we're going to build a bridge, we're going to build a road, and there's going to be a toll from the beginning, this is adding something into the equation on bridges that have been there for a century or more. So I just don't think it's apples to apples. And again, the most important point I can make to you is I could respond better if there was a plan to respond to. I've only seen the plans of the past. Maybe there'll be a new plan that looks different. But based on the plans of the past, I stand by my position.
The last time I asked you about this, you used the example of someone coming from Brooklyn to go to a hospital in Manhattan. What would you say to someone who lives on Staten Island, which doesn't have a public hospital, would have to drive to Brooklyn to get one, and in doing so would have to pay the very generous?
Look, the situation in Staten Island we've talked about before. We are trying to address what has been a historic inequity in terms of providing more city support for health care on Staten Island. The Vanderbilt Clinic is a real example of that. So my answer would be I want to solve that problem. I don't look at it through the question of the tolls. I look at it through the question of we have to do more and more to create health care equity for Staten Island. See if there's anything else? Yes?
Regarding reporting on...
Regarding what?
Regarding reporting on 4 men who were detained by ICE down in Brooklyn's criminal court.
You got to just pump it up a little.
Regarding reports of the 4 men who were detained in front of the Brooklyn criminal court last week, what would you say to immigrants going to court facing low charges? Is it safe to go to court?
Look, I do not know about that incident. I've been very clear that we have pushed the state and all those who run the court system to more aggressively address this issue with ICE and create some of the same boundaries and limitations we have with city buildings and city property. I can also say, as a matter of fact, these incidents have been very limited so far. So my goal for New York City is that folks who are here, who are New Yorkers, whether undocumented or not, can fully participate in the life of the city, go to school, have their kids go to school, go to public hospitals, go talk to the police when they need the police. We've got to make sure that that continues, including in our court system. So my answer to your question is I would say to people there have been very few instances where ICE went into the court buildings. We're all working to end that practice overall. People should keep participating in the court system.
Mr. Mayor, we had a report last week about 9 health and hospital doctors who were told they were going to be laid off. I know that doesn't sound like a lot of people, but the union has spoken about being really worried that this is a sign of what's to come given health and hospitals' finances. Can you just talk about that a little bit? And do you expect to announce anything to address that issue anytime soon? I'm
very comfortable and consistent with the no layoff plan when it comes to our unionized employees. I don't know all the details of these 9 doctors, My understanding is that they are being given other assignments in our system. So it's not, we've said very openly, no layoffs, but yes, there will be attrition, there will be reassignment, there will be retraining for some employees going to other work sites, other type of work. So I do not think it was a layoff in the traditional sense. I think we were offering them other types of work. But we're going to talk to the union. I think very highly of that union. I want to make sure we're all communicating, but our policy hasn't changed.
Is there any plan that you could support that would charge drivers a fee to enter central Manhattan, or any plan that does that you're not going to support?
So I don't deal in theoreticals. The only plans, I've only seen precisely 2 plans ever. Michael Bloomberg's plan from almost a decade ago and the Move New York plan from 4 years or 5 years ago. I have not seen any other plan. If someone presents me a different plan, I'll look at it and I'll come back with an answer, but I'm not going to do theoreticals. But right now, again, my closing comment, there is no plan on the table from Albany, and it would be interesting to see if they have one. Again, I've spoken to that one before also. I have a set of priorities I'm working on to address a whole host of issues. This, to me, what we're doing here today is a way of fighting global warming. What we did last week with the buildings, I'm focusing on the things that I think are the highest impact, the most immediate, and that are fair. We're going to look at a whole host of other things we can do over time, but the city government can't do everything simultaneously. Obviously, any plan would have to be approved by Albany. If they are already creating a plan, great. Just bring it out in the open so we can all talk about it. Thanks, everyone.